So here we are. We're back with talking about AI. Elizabeth brought up some great points the last time we got together about how the use of AI is a whole nother world of problems. Of course, it has its benefits, but um, people who do any research regarding AI, turning AI back on itself, it comes up with some scary possibilities. I'd like to kind of talk about first that there are about I guess 10 versions of AI as they think that they'll be, I guess. And the rule based is kind of where it starts is like along, we have AI systems in our home. Um, oh, your temperature fell below a thing, it turns the thing on, right? An alarm clock is a rule based a microwave, a stove that goes on and off by itself, right? So we've been using AI things, and then there's the context base, which is like the Siri and Alexa. Basically, what environment is it in, and it's pulling data that's relevant to that, right? Then you have the narrow domain stuff, which is like the mass data for hospitals and algorithms for financial business and things like that, which is scary in and of itself on how it works. Then you get into the reasoning and the analysis, the chat bots, chat GPT, um, kind of the auto drive vehicles, those kind of things. And then we start to get into the AGI, which is the general automated intelligence, which this is where it starts to get kind of, you know, creepy. And it's the ability to use, do software tasks, learn, understands kind of the thought and sensation of what people, mean when they're typing. You can connect a human to machine, and it can learn based upon brain signals, right? So all of these things that we were afraid of, oh, okay, Terminator, what was it, global net, or what was that for
Skynet.
us? Skynet. Here's where we're starting to get into that. And the next is the super intelligence. So, and I'm only at 6, by the way, right? I'm at point 6. Super intelligence is self-improving, all-knowing, can process abstract to reality, right? That's just at 6. By the time we get to 10, which is godlike, quantum, the ability to think across, time continuums, is like, okay, please God, let us not need that stuff right in my lifetime, because I don't even know how you would control something that knew that it was being controlled and knew that it was smarter than we are. But that leads us kind of into the crime. This is just kind of the background, the backdrop. Elizabeth, you had brought up some of the crimes that were out there, and if you want to kind of cover the kind of the meat of what we were going to discuss today, I'll fill in some of the holes that I found.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting on and looking, I started finding stuff about deep fakes and children that were having pictures of them taken off the internet, off of parents' social media or their own social media, and having them turn into either nude generated photos, or there's some of rape, there's porn, and these are of
Yeah.
children. And not only are they doing them of that nature, but I also found some where people are taking pictures of children that made national news that were murdered and creating videos from them without their parents' consent. Like, how traumatizing is that as well?
Mm.
So it's such a wide array of victims and what they can do with it now. There was a story about two boys that took girls from their school and decided to start making them and passing them around their school as young as elementary school students.
Mm.
And what, like, these kids have to grow up with that, and the amount of suicides that are happening because of it, and there's no control over it. It's
Yeah.
scary as a parent.
You know, so when you open up this discussion, there's so much with the deep fake. We know that, people have lost their careers. They've certainly lost their lives, and all because of someone doing something because they could. It's kind of, I've talked about it before, the Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus. Why did you do such a thing? Most of the time it's for a motive. For instance, a principal nearly lost his job because a disgruntled employee, a gym coach, used, all they need are 3 seconds of a person's voice, and they can basically write a script and have that person say anything in the voice. And so they did. And this guy took, months and months and months, having been suspended from his job because this person wrote that, oh, he said all, basically they have recordings of him saying all of these things. And then you look at like uh how hard it was to get people, when they were able to get proof of that, how hard it was to remove that from, people haven't being able to download it. So if you think about, what we talked about a couple episodes ago with Pornhub, a person is face is up there and you're trying to get it taken down. But once it's there, right, it's a kind of a perpetual crime,
Yeah.
and so when you think about suicide as, when it's dealing with children who don't have a lot of tools in their box, so they from my psychological background as a worker in that field, they see things as zeros and ones. There's no middle ground. Like it's always and never with them.
Yeah.
So I can imagine what you're talking about is that these people, how do what would they say? How do you get it taken down? How do you get kids to not be mean, right? Even if you knew it was fake, right? They're in a viper's nest. And I imagine, you still have children school age.
I do.
I can't imagine, have they had occurrence to see any of this kind of stuff play out in their world?
So they haven't had the opportunity to see it at school or it go on, let alone I haven't heard about it even going on in our small town. But I did sit and have the conversation with them and I did show them some of them and like, this is the danger that comes with this. And like, this isn't okay. Like, you can ruin somebody's life with this. And because my kids have already been through sexual abuse and that kind of trauma, they were just appalled that people would even do this to somebody else, let alone other children.
What about you, Forrest?
Well, one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about the internet lives on forever, there's 2 points I want to make. First of all, there was an actress that I grew up, I heard about, was Tracy Lords. And I remember when she came out in a movie called Crybaby with Johnny Depp, and it was a very popular movie. I thought it was a weird movie, but I learned then that she was a porn star and that she had done almost 20 films underage. She was under 18, and those films still live on forever today. I just looked it up that they're republishing in France and this, that, and the other. So I thought that's kind of an interesting point to share with your kids, that you cannot. Here's an example of something that's probably, I think it was she did these in the 80s. The other thing is that the suicide rate, whenever somebody goes through this, there is a large potential, because in essence, kids can view this as bullying. Okay. And we know that there's a high percentages of kids that kill themselves over something they can't control, and that they view this as being very harmful to them and very painful. So there's a high suicide rate. I don't know the numbers on that, JT. Maybe that's something you may have access to, but it's really strange, because I always ask the question, you were talking about motive. What's the purpose of doing something? And I think part of it could be just because we can, or there's another underlying issue. It's either money or desire.
Right.
Okay. So either you want to make money off of it, or you desire to see that type of content.
Right. I think that you're spot on with, because if you think money is a desire. So it would, but that first time, if you think about, and I, recently, this has only been a crime since last year, I think March of last year. So they have determined, because when we first started talking about it, I was like, well, wow, if it's just deep fake stuff, well, we know that if it has something to do with a real live person, that they made that a crime. But they also made it a crime to have anything that is indistinguishable from a real child. So you might as well just have real child pornography, because you're going to go to prison the same way as if it was fake. So that's the good news, right? But again, you think about who, those kids that made these deep fakes, and why they probably did it was, hey, because they could. They figured out a way of taking these photos and go, wouldn't it be cool, right? And so they did, and they turned it into somewhat of like a cottage industry. I think it was like 50 girls that they did that to, and they were arrested for it, which they should have been. But it's interesting when you think about what is, it's always a crime to have illicit images of children, whether you're a child or not. Right. If I'm under the age of 18 and I have a 17-year-old, I have a picture of a 17-year-old girl, it's still child pornography. But it leans into, if you're 15 and you have sex with a 15-year-old, right? How does that play into, the game, right? Guys, I've always wondered, like, well, boy, the things I did as a 15, 16-year-old with the same people of my age, I think that the ante is up now. What you could do back then, you couldn't even possibly do now without getting in trouble, So it's like you said, the desire thing. And I think that's really the giant problem, is that because we have the ability to do it, that means people are going to do it. And then add on the thing that Elizabeth brought up, is like, how hard is it to get it taken down once you discover it, if you ever do, So, Elizabeth, I believe you probably had read about those people that they deep faked, and now they're in their 40s, right? You want to speak about that case a bit?
So I mean, you can go off on it. It's just,
Yeah.
it's out there. It's out there forever. Even if you had a platform take it down, somebody's already downloaded it. Somebody's going to re-upload it, and they're out there forever. I mean, these people that are in adulthood now, especially when they were doing it with like Photoshop before it was even what it is.
Right.
That's what it was then, but they're still out there. You never come back with that. And you have friends, like one of the cases that I read as an adult, a friend came to her and was like, hey, this is what I found. And it turned out to be one of her really good friends that did it. And it just,
Right.
you never get that down. And you never, like, you always go out and you're going to wonder who's seen it. Did this person see it? Do they know? What do they think now? Do they think it's really me? And all of these just thoughts that are just intrusive in your head that you can't get away from.
So you when you think about the value of a thing, it's like, okay, well, we can't get rid of AI. We're not going to get rid of AI. But if we could, should we? Given that you've got people that are always going to leverage technology for evil, for nefarious reasons.
Well,
But when you look at, go ahead.
Well, you know what?
Because that's really my question.
That's a great question. And what really I find intriguing is, if you go back to when we were kids, we had 3 network channels that we could watch on TV, primarily ABC, NBC, and CBS. And they were highly monitored, highly filtered. Okay. Mm-hmm. So at that time, the regulations were easy to manage. So when the internet came up, it's very strange to me that you can manage this one pipeline, but the rest, you got another 359 degrees that you're ignoring. Mm-hmm. And to me, AI could be utilized to do that. That could go in and hunt. They send out, the way the Google and Yahoo and all those, they send out crawlers, they look at content, and they reveal attributes of that. And so I would think now we have the horsepower, the physical processing horsepower, and the software with AI to go and grab it, strip it, destroy it, whatever. And so in that regard, I'd say yes. And I have some other feelings about AI that are more scientific, sci-fi-ish. But I do think AI can be used if there was some sort of a governing body. And I hate to say it, because anytime you bring the government on anything, it's scary.
But that's what's going on now. That they are having these meetings. Nations are having them. Corporations are having them. And it comes down to, the foresight of saying that when asked, well, what is the governance over AI in your, let's say, your home or your work or in the government? And up until recently, I think most people say, well, I don't use AI, which is a lie. They just don't realize that they're using it when they're doing searches and stuff like that. But that it's, we got a guy, right, who's overseeing that, it's everybody's, job. And what the hard part is that if you said, okay, where would we be without it? Okay, life would be different for sure. But you go back and say the people that have been dealing in, let's say, illicit, illegal porn, they've been doing it since the beginning of time. The minute that they could, transfer images or, fetish items through the mail, they do it. Willing to break the laws that already exist, right? So would never go away. And we couldn't get rid of the mail for the sake of, let's just shut down the mail system because we don't want these bad guys doing this stuff. But what's different now is that the average, I hate to use the word dullard, isn't using AI for the betterment of mankind. They're doing it to get out of work. They're doing it to make things simpler. Sure. That's great, right? With responsibility. Because I've used AI, I've looked at what AI has brought back to me. I said, okay, I want to do an article. Hey, let's get some ideas going. I've read what AI has sent back to me, and if you're really paying attention, it's really just kind of insipid, right? It's taken, this, that, they're like, okay, it's all on its face. Now, that's what's available to me. But when you look at people that have these, algorithms where they can look up data, and I think that that's where the value is. But then you have this other side where the AI crime that are going on are so sophisticated now. Like it went from the dark ages to an age of enlightenment. For instance, the crimes that people were doing by trying to get your email address or your social security number, they had to data mine that. Now they can call you up in a voice that is familiar to you and get that information. For instance, there's the daughter in danger. This Jennifer, you might have read about that. She gets a call saying that her daughter has been kidnapped, basically, her daughter's voice and all that. And I was like, wow. Now she didn't, they asked for this amount of money and they didn't get that amount of money. And then finally that she realized that the daughter wasn't home. But then it occurred to me, what about, this was to lure a parent to do something. They lure them to send money, lure them to, buy into the grift. But what about luring children out of the home? Hey, I need you to get in so-and-so's car. Hey, I'm at the hospital. I mean, these are things that they were doing, but not using AI, right? I got to tell you,
I've seen this type of scam with texting.
Right.
But a couple of years ago, we had somebody text a friend of mine that I work with, and they were stuck in the Bahamas and they lost their wallet and they needed money to be sent. So we sent a test question.
Yeah.
And they failed the test question. But we were, for a while, we were kind of freaked out, like, oh my God,
Sure.
it was a great story, right? And so we immediately got on Facebook and we notified. It was actually a girl that we work with that was an attorney, and she had her and her husband had opened up a dental practice, so she was easily reachable through social media, and she couldn't figure out why they picked her to emulate. We're trying to figure out, well, how did you become the target? But it was interesting because for a moment, imagine listening to what you're saying, JT. I thought of that story immediately because my friend and I, we were freaked out about that from a text. Imagine if you heard a voice. It's like a extra layer of you almost had this gut reaction and you're not thinking logically. You're like, okay, I've got to do what I can to save this
Sure,
person.
right. Because it's so it's emergent. It's a
If it's your child, your
correct.
child
Like think about
in danger, you're just like in go mode.
right. Now, let's exactly what I'm talking about is Elizabeth, what if your children received a call with your voice telling them to do something?
So we've actually had this discussion as well because
I'm sure you have.
And I told them, I said, there's a test question. Ask me if I like pineapples. And unless my answer is, unless it's pineapple upside down cake, not really, which is a lie. I like pineapple, but they know to ask something that it wouldn't be able to answer in a specific way. And then you hang up and you call me, like you call my cell phone immediately.
Right.
And I will do the same for you guys. If I get a call that I think is you guys' number, like, because I've always thought about that. What if we are out somewhere? It takes 2 seconds, even if you are an on top of it parent and you are paying attention, like it can still happen. So like I do think about that. What if they were at school? What if I did let my 16-year-old walk to McDonald's, which is literally not even a 5-minute walk from his high school because they're right next door. Like it could happen. And so I did think about that and you got to prepare your kids for that and other family members as well. Definitely talking to them about that.
Well, for anybody watching this, if you ever want to know what to do about protecting your kids, I would say you need to contact Elizabeth because Elizabeth is so far ahead of this. I worked in a lot of different industries, but I've always relied on physical security a lot. For instance, being the man of the house, my wife leans on me to make sure that she's safe. So, if we're going out somewhere, she's just wandering around, looking around like at everything. She's like, ooh, look at this squirrel, whatever. Because she has this faith that I'm standing behind going, okay, he's too close, they're too close. That's, those kind of things. It's kind of just in me. Also, door locks, right? Weapons, big dogs, right? Like there's a workflow in me. But when I read this kind of stuff, I go, wow, there's a whole nother level of responsibility not to be dumb, which is really hard not to be because it's like nothing is going to save you from the pain that will be caused because you're ignorant of what's going on. But how could you possibly know, right? Well, now I know, and I say, okay, my answer to your pineapple question would be chicken salad sandwich because it's not pineapple at all, right? And no one could even guess that, right? But that's where your brain has to go. You got to think, okay, will they remember to ask the safe word? Will there ever, and that's something you have to practice. And people say, practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect. But Forrest, what about you and yours? I mean, you have older children. You've been kind of caught up in, the average everyday children, wrecking vehicles, calling dad for this and that. So it wouldn't be anything new for me to get a chat bot or something to say, Dad, I need you to send me $500 because I wrecked the car again.
Well, fortunately, the kids, I've been through kind of a couple of evolutions for them. And, for example, we were approached by a man in the parking lot at Costco a couple years ago. And I grabbed my daughter and I just pushed her behind me and she grabbed my belt. And then my other kid scooted behind me. And I'm talking to this guy because he was asking a weird question. And I handled it, but he was very erratic and he got really belligerent with me. And I asked him to step back and all that. The other thing is that I track my kids on my phone. And so like the other night, 2 nights ago, my daughter stopped to eat. She's 19 years old. She stopped to eat at Whataburger with after work with her friends. And all of a sudden, I've got this notification that her phone was down to 5%. Well, once it gets down to 5%, you can't track them. So she'd been there over an hour. And so I'm calling her, I'm texting her, I'm about to hop on my bike, my motorcycle and go, zoom out there really quick. And she finally responded back to me. But I've not thought about this. Now I will tell you this, because I've been through several accidents with my kids. I pretty much, when my kids call me when they're not supposed to call me, I cringe,
Yeah.
And I can immediately, just from their tone, and here's the thing. If somebody tried to they would have to deep fake the exact type of scenario. If they were to say, Dad, I was in a wreck, I would know immediately whether it was a problem, whether it was real or not. So now I'm not saying that's foolproof. This conversation has given me something to think about.
Yeah. Do you think that your kids would know it was you or not you though? Like, because I tell you, if somebody recorded you telling me, hey man, we just got to let you go. We got blah, blah, blah. Right. I'd be like, oh, well, I hate that. I'm sorry, Forrest, let me know. Right. I mean, because it's so sophisticated. It's not like it's going to glitch, I wonder if they would know. And that, because as I did my research, it really didn't cover that, which makes more sense to cover than like the parent getting scammed, right? Like, I know that in history, it's been people showing up at schools or playgrounds and saying, your mom told me to come get you, right?
Yes.
Text messages that are saying, hey, you need to blah, 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 right? People mimicking things. And yet in all of that I was like, why is that not here? Because that's the scary thing. Because kids living, Elizabeth, you're a little bit different. You've controlled their ability to have technology that can jam them up, right? But at a cost, right? You need to be present more. But I don't know if my daughter would know that it wasn't me, especially if she thought, and that's a conversation I have to have with her immediately, right? Yeah. And the more that we talk about it, the more I want to end this and call her and say, hey, because here's where it gets crazy, I think, for everybody, is the minute that you start to think that they're listening, right? The devices are. And I think I told Forrest this last time we spoke. I went to a party. It was a Super Bowl party. And I was talking at the party about, what was it, Forrest? It was about how sewing machines work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really bizarre. Like, you hear that come out of my mouth, you'd be like, really? Okay. Like, I was like, man, it's just bizarre that, how it has to work and blah, and I'm having this conversation, not in my house, somebody else's house.
Yeah.
I come home, turn on TV the next day or whatever it was. And what's in my feed? What's in my YouTube feed? How a sewing machine works. So why I say that creeped me out, because as we're having this discussion, my phone is right there, my tablet is here, the computer's there, and I'm saying, boy, I need to call my daughter right now before somebody does some wacky thing. Now I'm thinking, oh my God, I should, because my phone might be going, oh, hey, bad guys in somewhere, yada, yada. He's vulnerable now. He's admitted it to, those kind of things. Now I'm going to calm that down a bit. I'm going to rely on some systems that are in place, like school and, protective systems that are in place. But honestly, like you, Elizabeth, I mean, I'm getting to be more like you in that if it can happen, if it's possible, it can happen. It will happen, right? Forrest, isn't that what the law is?
I would say, and Elizabeth, I'd be curious to hear what you had to say to this. And this is a technique that I learned many, many, many years ago. And I call it a sales technique, but I learned it running a call center and taking technical support calls. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to control the conversation, number one, and you have to ask questions because it gives you time to think. So if your kid calls you up and says, this happened, this thing that startles you, you need to, first question you say is, where are you at? You need to start asking questions. Who is with you? Because as a parent, if you know that your kid is supposed to be at work or if they're at school or if they're out with friends, this gives you a time to process that information. And if it's truly your child, those are litmus tests that they will pass. In the meantime, you might discover another question as a brevity code that Elizabeth alluded to.
Right.
But you should know where your kids are going to be. You should be tracking their devices. And this helps you kind of maneuver. It's not foolproof, but it will help you navigate and maneuver. If they don't pass the brevity code, the question is you hang up. Elizabeth, you say hang up and you call your kid.
Yeah.
Because they could spoof your phone number, right? They could actually dial through an app that says, I'm going to broadcast my kid's phone number. I know the kid's name. I've scraped that information off of various social medias and whatever. And I've got a recording of their voice because they're out there on TikTok doing stupid things.
Right. So I want to get back to that to what we initially started talking about, is that our hubris is always what gets us in trouble. In any situation, you think you know more than you do. You run headlong into a situation. And what I see is that in the case where the woman said, the girl had said her images were being deep faked, she had her account was locked down to friends and family only. And it still happened to her. And it just, occurs to me that we really are just kind of like whistling in the dark saying, well, it's not going to happen to me, when all of our images, all of our recordings, all of our videos are out there for pretty much anybody to see. And it is irresponsible, on such a personal level, because the fact that I have not had my identity stolen thus far is a miracle, and probably has happened, right? With our children now entering into, let's just say children entering into the social world, to allow them to be able to put their photos up there, which is a big part of their social life, right? It's what norm is so precarious that you wonder, is it more responsible to say no? No, you're not going to put your likeness up there with you doing the peace sign or, hugging right? It's like, I believe that you wouldn't be wrong to say no, but what is the fight? What kind of fight would that be? Would you be pushing your kids into saying, hey, it may be a fight you win for now, but I don't know if they could really appreciate it for, once they get out of your house, they'd be like, okay, well, look, here I am doing it. But it's really scary to think about.
So I do have adult children who did decide to get social media, but really the problem really stems from you can control it. You can tell your children no. You're the parent. It's not your job to be their friend. It's your job to be their parent and to protect them from these things. And if that means they're going to be upset with you, and it is a fight, like I will tell you, with my oldest two, my first two, My oldest is about to be 23. It was such a huge fight because all of their friends have it. And then you have all these school groups that, unless you're a part of this group on Instagram, like you don't get the messages and so on and so forth. And like, I did have to have those discussions with their teachers. No, they're not going to have social media. And if you want them to have these updates, you're going to need to send them to me. So for a while, I did let them use my Instagram because I don't have anything on there. And whatever they need to say, they can say where I can see it. And so, but that's really the other thing. You really need to be able to sit down and talk to your children about this. And don't just talk to them, actually show them. So many parents want to protect their children from what's going on in the world and the bad stuff. And that would be so harsh for them to see. And how do they process that? You show them that so that they can process it later, so that they can make those decisions. My oldest child actually wound up getting rid of all of his social media. He got it when he first turned 18 and it wound up being at a high school and so on and so forth, and then did send me a thank you. Like, it was a really awesome moment to have a turnaround come back, and he was like, hey mom, like I really get it now, and I just want to let you know, like I deleted all of my social media, and thank you for showing me that and doing that when we were younger. And I was like,
that is crazy. Yeah.
thank heaven, like all that fighting.
Yeah, I mean, people don't get that. I think we talked about that before. You know, I've been a parent for a long time, and I'm still just like kind of getting little left-handed compliments. Hey, boy, you know, they're not even directed at me, but I take credit for them. But him to call you and say, hey, thanks a lot, yada yada yada. I mean, because that battle that you had to fight, you
Was
know,
rough.
I mean, fear is a thing, and obviously, I think that if people saying, "Well, I'm not going to let my kids play outside because there's bad people out there," right? I'm not going to let them have this because there are bad people out there. You know, there's all of that. I'm not going to let them learn things because there's bad people out there. I mean, it goes that distance between 0 and 100, right? There's all of this, but some people, you know, uber uh, fundamentalists be like, no, we're not even gonna have snaps. We're gonna have loops and buttons, right? Versus whatever. Somewhere in the between is the right thing, but everybody is still in danger, right? There's still a chance, and I think it's really hard to know what's the right thing to do, because if I was to tell my daughter now, hey, you're done, the little bit of time I have left with her would not be edifying. It wouldn't be edifying to me, right? And to her. So that's a tough thing, right? Especially when it's a mysterious maybe, right? So what are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, you could protect her 100% by not letting her leave the house, or you're going to have to say, be prudent, be vigilant, that kind of thing. What do you think, Craig?
Well, we used to talk about this in personal protection training courses that I would put on, and there's that sliding scale between being in a rubber room with their own oxygen supply and not having any joy of life, and then just complete oblivion, running around the highway with no protection. Somewhere in the middle, we each have to find that balance, that perfect balance. You know, where we're not meant to live in fear, but there is a prudent level of caution that we should instill into our children. You know, hey, pay attention, be aware,
Right.
but don't live in fear. Don't let it steal your joy. So somewhere on that sliding scale, we each have to find that balance. And I think that's the journey is finding it. And I think half the battle is knowing to look for that balance. You know, so
Yep.
many parents, they're such helicopter parents, they do rob their child of that development, and they try to over safeguard them. And it's not optimal. If you know, somewhere again, there's an optimal level, and if you go too far either way, you're losing something. So
Right. Well, you
um
know, I wrote one of my first screenplays is about a loving couple that you know, they have this really just storybook kind of thing going on, and they have a little daughter, and the dad wants to get a pool because it's going to be great. Well, you know, pools are great, but in Florida, one of the number one reasons that children die are drowning, right?
yeah.
And so they lose the kid, they lose sight of a lot of things. It's a very dramatic, very hard story. But I wrote it because I was in that place where I bought a pool. And I thought, no matter what you do to safeguard, the risk is always there, right? It's like Craig, we've talked about it before. If you are carrying a weapon, every situation you're in, there's a weapon involved. Every situation, right? And I think that people are, kind of dumb to that. And they just go, oh, it's in my halls. Oh, it's no big. They don't realize the psychology of what it does when you get into a thing, into kind of some extreme situation. Because I recognize when I have it in my car and somebody jolts out or stops in front of me and gets road rage, I know that it's really close by, right? Whereas other people aren't thinking. The people without the weapons aren't thinking, right? And that I always tell my wife, I was like, you need to calm down. You don't know that what's going on in that other car. And if they're if they're unhinged, right? Well, it's the same with our children. It's like Craig, just before you popped on, we were talking about how, having this social media has caused the opportunity for these grifters and people to take these images of children and create deep fake things. Where that led us to was that some of these criminals are using 3 seconds of somebody's voice and able to create a bot, a persona of like their children calling them, asking them for help. And then it occurred to me that isn't it more dangerous that somebody could be calling your daughter as you, saying, hey, you need to be here, blah, 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 and you need to come pick me up, blah, 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 and it isn't you, right? Oh, please get into so-and-so's vehicle because it's a friend from work, right? Like, this is where we were at right when you jumped on. And it is horrific to think because that the scumbags are out there. And the minute and you know how that who the scumbags are because they're the first ones to think of how to leverage this stuff for some gross thing. Hey, the mail. Oh, wow, look, we've got the Pony Express. I could get child porn across the nation in 2 weeks now, right? Instead of, wow, I can contact somebody or I can build a better, mousetrap or I can do this. And that is really horrific because AI has just made it so easy for them to do and get and be plausible deniable of like, well, it's not a real child or it's not, it's not real. I didn't hurt anybody kind of thing, which to any criminal gives them a bigger safety net, right? They can climb higher in their crimes. They can do worse things. And we were just trying to figure out what would be the right answer, And I think you hit on it. It's like, we have to be ever vigilant, right? But our children, instilling that in them, I think that's really the hard thing. How do I get them to recognize when they're being grifted? So what are your thoughts on it there, Forrest? It's been a while since you chimed in. I didn't mean to hijack you up there, but you look comfortable. So
No. Elizabeth, what's interesting is that she's taught us a lot about her strategy. And I think the common theme for her, she started when they were young, before they were introduced to technology. Right. So she set the standards. And that's what I tell people today. Start when they're young. Establish when you're going to have them have technology. And one thing that you need to keep in mind is whatever they do on that device, that is her device. It is contracted in her name. So if somehow they do something they shouldn't be doing, and that phone gets confiscated by the school, and then they inspect what's on it, who do you think the police are going to come interview? They're going to come interview Elizabeth because technically she owns that phone. And so that is a good conversation to have with your kids. My oldest son, I had the conversation with him. I let him know because he had a girlfriend. And before he even thought about doing anything that I didn't approve of, I had that conversation with him. I said, you do not need to be taking any pictures that are inappropriate. That's disrespectful to her. It's disrespectful to her parents. And by the way, it's a crime, and it reflects on me legally. So you would be you'd feel really bad if you got me arrested for some bonehead thing that you did. And he listened. I mean, he was like, wow, I never thought about that, you know? And I don't even know, I can't even tell you that he was thinking about doing that. He was just getting serious with his girlfriend. And I kept hearing about people doing this, you know, young kids taking pictures. I had a friend that was a principal at a school. And so I was hearing these stories. I'm like, hey, I better get ahead of this with my own kid.
Well, you know, I wanted to bring up, I'm going to have a discussion with Aspen later on about this, but she is in an industry of, you know, headshots and, you know, modeling and things like that. And it occurred to me as I was going through this, how vulnerable these folks are, because what social media has done is really they've enabled kind of this auto assassination of your career, right? It's if anybody doesn't like you, they can fake you doing something or you do something. But to have your life out there, your pictures, you know, you're as vulnerable as you can be. You might as well just be naked, because that's what it comes down to, is they have your information. They know who you are. I used to worry about whether somebody was going to have my social security number. It's crazy because when Craig and I were in the service, we got letters, we got a memorandum with everybody's social security number on it, you know, as like, hey, he passed this test, he passed that test. I'm on a list of like 50 people and all their social security numbers on it. I looked through my record now, I was like, wow, like I have all this information, right? But it isn't in me to do something like that because that's just wrong, right? But to other people, like, oh, I could take out credit cards on all these people. But nowadays, your social security number is like not even the most important thing they can get from you, because of the voice and face recognition, you know, login stuff that the banks are using, right? So I got to tell you, Craig, you might need to rethink how you were going to do your self-protective, you know, courses, because there's a whole component of cyber, you know, security and essential elements of friendly information that you and I grew up with. That's like OPSEC. That's like, I tell you what, I'm surprised. And I was in that world. And the more I read, I'm like, oh my God, these people are thinking way far ahead of me, right? That they could call my child with my voice, tell my wife that I'm leaving, right? You know, deep fake me with another person or something, right? Uh, how are you gonna know, you know, and how are you gonna get that off of the internet? What are you thinking there, Elizabeth? I mean, I know your answer is don't let them do it, right?
Yes and no. I think that you can be a parent, you can monitor, you can be all over it. Like if you ask your child for the phone so you can see, like, unfortunately, I know some parents whose children who they said no on social media, or only one that I can see, who also have other accounts, but because they don't check their phones and go through it, like they don't know that they have a secret account. And so, I mean, I think it just comes with a responsibility to be all over it, to go through their phones, to have those candid conversations. And you don't have to be mean about it. Like I had to learn that there was a difference now between the way I talked to my older children about it and when they were living at home. And I didn't allow it, not even for this reason. I just knew grown adults aren't responsible with this. Like I can't expect you to be. And now being able to sit and have that conversation with them, being like, hey, I do love you. My job is to protect you. And this is what's really going on. So I know it's not always going to make sense. I know you might not agree with it, but this is why I'm doing this. And they really can get it, especially when you show them examples and be like, look, this is why I'm trying to safeguard you. This is really what is out there and the possibility of what can happen. In our family, we've definitely learned that the possibility of what can happen will happen. I was like you. I'm like, not getting a pool. Like, I don't want a kid to drown. And unfortunately, my kids had gone swimming somewhere else. They had all gotten out and gone up to the house, and it's on a hill, so it was away from the pool. And I've very much taught that, you know, accountability for each other, like know where each other's at, like make sure if anybody's doing something they're not supposed to, help safeguard. And because of that, one of my children noticed that the youngest was not with them. And sure enough, they found him floating in the pool and he had already started sinking. And like teaching your children how to react in those moments and giving them that life experience. My 10-year-old jumped in the water, who wasn't a good swimmer, dug him out and started CPR before the adult got there. I mean, so just preparing for what can happen, will
Well,
happen.
please tell me how this story ends, though, right? I mean,
So
let's get
so
to the part where, yeah.
he's alive and he's beautiful.
Okay.
I mean, he has a few issues, but for what it should be, like
Yeah.
he is a miracle. Thankfully, like because of that situational awareness that I had been like into my kids, because where we live, I mean, we have a lot of illegals that are coming through, like, so it was always important for me, like situational awareness, what's going on, what do you hear, like notice what's around you, and so on and so forth. Like it was enough for them to be like, hey, where is he at? And they did. They went and looked for him and they found him, and they were able to once the adult started CPR, after about a minute,
Right.
she brought him back, and we went to the hospital, and he's here and he's beautiful.
So Elizabeth, this is a tough question, but it does occur to me that in this battle space, this arena that we're in now, right? If you were to start having children today, given what the world looks like today, what is the responsible amount of children that a person should have, that if it's up to them to manage their cybersecurity, their physical security, their education, you know, being that you've done it, which is taking on the mantle and carrying it through, you know, all of that. But when you think about the responsibilities, I mean, it seems to me like I got one and that's enough. Like it's one now, right? But if I had to do that for multiple kids, I would need to take on help. I'd have to have a cybersecurity officer. I'd have to have Craig as a physical security guy. You know, I'd have to have
Well,
reviews.
I would
Right?
send my kids to the Sawman School of Swimming for sure.
Yeah.
Because what Craig would do is he would teach them to tread water with their hands and their feet bound up, as he was trained in the Navy SEAL
In your
program.
clothing.
Yeah, in their clothing. Yeah, with probably with a a 50-pound rucksack on as well.
Well,
Drown proofing.
drown proofing is amazing. It's the most restful thing when you can do it right. It was amazing to me how many people joined the Navy who couldn't swim, though. Right, Craig? Like you're going, I don't understand.
Yeah.
My
Sure.
dad was one of them. I was all, and of all things, you joined the
I
Navy.
don't understand. What did you
explain?
Yeah, what did you think that this was going to be about, right?
Well, Craig, when you went through BUDS, was there anybody that had to learn to swim?
No, you have to pass a swim test to qualify to go to the course, and it's
Is it like a 200
legit. So you
yards
have
or
to.
something, Craig? Like 200-yard swim you got to do in boot camp if you're heading there or something, right?
Oh, they've got standards. I
Pre-qual.
forget what they all are, but
Yeah.
you gotta be able to hold your own.
Well, Craig, there's a
Crazy, man.
story that goes around the internet. I don't know if it's true or not. You could tell me if you've heard it, if it's true, but there was a guy who couldn't swim who basically ran underwater. And the instructor says, well, I could teach him to swim, but I can't teach that type of determination. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
heard that story.
Well, that is true though. I mean, either somebody has that drive or they don't, and it's
Yeah.
I would say anybody that makes it through BUDS has an unreasonable drive, and
Right.
it's
I
not a
agree.
normal job for anybody to aspire to. And
Right.
we laugh about our daughter Aspen and how driven she is. I think a lot of that DNA gets passed down. We get parents
Sure.
that are wired for whatever reason to be in like an overdrive or overachieving kind of a status, and it does seem to pass down a lot to the offspring. So
It
Yeah, for
falls
sure.
into some pathology for sure, right? I've worked with these guys, but the one thing, that determination, the willingness, it's laudable for sure. But yeah, it's also scary. Your daughter scares me, and as I will interview her, I will tell her. I've already told her 100 times. But it is interesting as I go back and I rewind to what we were just saying, is that her profile is so precarious because of the things that she has wanted to do in life. And the worst part about it is that if she being as good as it is she wants to be, it only takes one thing to derail a career like that.
Yeah, sure.
One thing. And man, I don't know what kind of safeguards, because Craig, when I first started, I talked about all these levels of AI that they're developing and they expect to develop.
Hmm.
I got to like number 6-ish, and it's scary there. There's Skynet at number 6 and there's 10. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So as it's like any tool, you can use it for good. And I believe that 80%, 90% of people, use it for good, want to use it for good. It is, the random things sometimes, spontaneous, what do they call it? Mutations that, that change things. For instance, a doctor who wants to create a new medicine uses AI to say, hey, I want to create a cure for medicine. And then he puts a negative in front of a number and it creates a disease. And he had to stop it. Like, but you opened up that, like AI didn't forget that stuff. He created molecules on the computer and he had to stop it and then tell the government about it. But it was in that, what happened, what if kind of thing. And, for me, I have this new level of concern over what's going on in my daughter's phone. And I know that she is responsible. I am paying attention. But when you realize it won't save her, right? It won't save her from the horrors that are out there. Like that is, how do you mitigate that? Craig, what do you think? Like how would, I imagine her with, her profiles out there, her headshots for work and all that stuff. I mean, it had to be scary for you,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've been overridden, and like I said, she's got an unreasonable will, and she's going to do what she's going to do in her adult life, with or
Right,
without us. And so my thing was just, I'm going to protect her. I'm going to stay close to her. I'm going to love her and make sure she's covered
right,
as best as I can with what she's gonna do. She's a force of nature, that one. Um, so when I went to go to the SEAL team, my parents didn't try to stop me. They didn't say, you shouldn't do it. It's dangerous. They're like, go be your best. And my mom did say to me once, one too many times, be careful. And once I was a warrior, I told her, I said, Mom, I don't need you telling me to be careful. That's actually dangerous as a warrior. You tell me to win. That
right.
come home with your shield or on it kind of a thing from the Spartan
Yeah,
culture. I
right.
think if you're going to do something, you'd better go ahead and go hard.
No half measures,
And
right?
and there does come, that spiritual nature of it too, the spiritual aspect of anything. Are you going to live in fear and let the threats stop you and rob you from your dreams and from your objectives and your goals? Or are you going to walk in the power that you were created to and go and achieve those things? And you said it before, you're never going to be completely safe. There's no such thing. You have to kind of just resign yourself to the fact that, well, things happen. We're going to be wise about how we go about things. We're going to take the prudent precautions, but not to the point to where we're padded in a rubber room
Right.
and just robbed of everything. So, and I think it's at some point now, there's so much out there that can come at us from so many different directions. We have to just know who we are, choose who we are on the inside, and then know who we belong to, and then just go forward in faith, and then enjoy the journey, knowing,
Right.
yeah, stuff happens, but you shouldn't be terrified about it,
Right.
you know.
Elizabeth, what I think the big takeaway here, and I've said it before, is that you can't remove something without adding something, right? You've not done that, at least from what I know, is that you control by negation, but you're not saying, hey, you're not adding, you are adding other things. You're adding education to it. you're trusting, you're treating them as an adult as much as you possibly can, because you're saying, this is why. You're not just going because I said so, because
Yeah.
it's dangerous. There are monsters out there, as we know. You're saying this is what monsters look like, and they look like you and me. And you have to have a sense inside. So I appreciate that, because it would be easy, knowing what we know of how you manage that is like, well, that sounds very cultish like, right? But the difference is that there's love there, real love. Cults they manipulate people to do a thing. They're swaying people for their own, to serve their own need. Whereas you are truly out there on your own saying, I will go with you, right? I will walk with you. And I'm not going to be like, you're not a hypocrite in it. So, I got your back on that. I tell you, like I said, I don't know if I could engage my daughter in the same manner now and still walk away with an intact relationship with her. But I certainly know that when I finish this conversation, when I do see her this evening, I'm going to talk about all these things that I learned. And what I learned is that ignorance will get you in trouble. And how can you possibly know, everything? You can't. But when something comes out, when something's in the news, don't think it's them, right? Don't go, oh, well, that's them. Child abduction, being able to call a kid out from the parking lot via text, Forrest, you saying, being asked for money via text because of something. We have got to have that mechanism, that, I authenticate in the blind kind of thing that, you use with, I say chicken salad sandwich if they're asking for pineapple, something that isn't connected. But yeah, we've got to be better. And I hope that the people watching today have, raised some questions, do the homework. And I'm going to provide the links associated with this to anybody that's listening. And one of the things I wanted to wrap up is that, yes, there is a law, the federal law protecting against deep fake porn of children, that any image that is indiscriminately, or I guess that's not the word, but if you can't tell that it's not a real child, it's child pornography, and you're going to go to jail for it. It does stop at drawings, artwork, right? To a point. If it shows child abuse in any way, they consider that illegal stuff as well. So I strongly recommend everybody going to look up what the law is, because it is fairly new, and there are new laws being passed every day about it. So, and I'll share some of those links as well. Forrest, do you have something you want to wrap up your? But it can't be about. What can it not be about? Come on, man.
Blank.
You're drawing a blank. It can't be about jury duty, man. It cannot be another jury duty.
I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking
You got to wait a
about.
whole year before you can use that analogy again.
It's a great analogy,
Go
but
ahead.
I'm not going to bring it up.
Right.
I will say this. You asked Elizabeth about raising kids in today's society, in today's time. I would certainly limit, their access to technology from the beginning. And one of the things that we did with all of our kids was we read to them every day. And eventually, like Garrett, when he was a child, he didn't know how to read. He just memorized the words, and he would take a book and he would be quoting it. And eventually he learned to read, and then he would take the books from us. But, you had said earlier about replacing. So if you introduce this to them, don't give them access to the internet. I would even go so far as a parent, you need to reduce, if you've got new kids, you need to reduce what you're watching. Get rid of your cable. Okay. For example, you don't really need it, and read more and spend more time with your kids, training them. Elizabeth has really talks about all the things that she does. And I know it takes a lot of time, but she has a lot of really good stories of the experiences, because I don't know, Elizabeth, about the time your kids become tweens, they don't want to be hanging around with mom and dad anymore. That's what my experience was. And so we did Girl Scouts with my kids and my two of my kids, and I really was in their life every day. Then it was volleyball, and then they got their own life, and now I beg them to watch, go to the movies with me or go out to dinner.
I get you, man. Right. Elizabeth, your last words on it?
My last words would just be present. Be present in their everyday life. Like, know what they're doing. Go to their games. Even if you're not sitting down and reading, which I think is fantastic. Hang out with them. I haven't had a child not want to hang out with me yet. Even my adult kids still do, which makes me feel fabulous. Um, just be present when they want to talk to you about something that matters to them. Listen, even if you think it's dull and it's boring. Like, I get to hear about video games and I'm like, this is so, but make it important to you. Ask questions, because that will really open up the door for when something does come up for them to come talk to you about.
Right. I agree with that. Craig, last words, man.
Well, I just learned to see my children as such a gift, and the opportunity to parent them and mentor them is a huge responsibility and a huge blessing. And I can see where I was gone too much of their childhood, and it cost more than I had anticipated. I was trying to provide financially for them, but what they, a friend of mine overseas told me, we were on a surveillance, and I was talking about it. I said, man, my kids, teachers and coaches are like saying, oh, I guess you do actually exist after all. Last time I was home. And he goes, yeah, well, Craig, kids spell love Time.
Mm,
And that was my wake up call. That fell on me like a sack of bricks. I was like, okay, I got to get home more. You know, and now I'm able to continue parenting them and mentoring them and teaching them. And I would say just value that opportunity for them. They're precious.
right.
And you have the opportunity to prepare them for this world that'll eat them alive if they're not ready.
Right.
And it's a
Right.
fantastic thing to do, to empower someone. We empower somebody that we love. Knowledge is power. So teaching is a big gift that we can give them. And
Right.
that takes that relationship, like Elizabeth has built with her kids, beautiful. So, there's always a do-over. If you blow it one day, apologize,
Right.
reset, and be the better leader, and circle
No,
back around, hit it again.
And
I
that's
hear
really
that.
a key point that you just said, Craig. If you mess up one day, come back, apologize, because you have no idea how much respect that gives them for you when you do that. And I can
Oh,
honestly say
sure.
apologizing to your kids sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
No,
weren't born a parent, right? That's
Yeah.
that's something
right.
that your kids need to know. Like, I wasn't born a parent,
Yeah. Right.
and I'm trying, and
I'm learning with
Right. Right. If they see your mistakes and they can associate with it, it makes you not a god. It makes you a person. I have leaned toward that myself. Well, I tell you, I always love these conversations, and for anybody that's listening out there, reach out to any one of us. If anything that we said rang true, you had some concerns for, we're all available, and we see this as a mission, God given, an opportunity to speak to the masses, and not for the sake of just being words and sounds and loud noises, but reach out to us, and we will make every effort to answer your questions or reach back. But with that, I thank everybody, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
thanks, you guys.
Thanks all.
Peace. And we are out.